My girlfriend's parrot kept saying, "I love you, Kevin," in her voice. She denied it, so I brought the bird in the room. It squawked, "Don't tell Mark." She was left pale and frantically trying to silence him. I, 29M, never thought a bird would destroy my relationship, but here I am, single, and still processing what happened 3 weeks ago. My girlfriend and I had been together for 2 years. She worked from home as a freelance graphic designer, and about 6 months ago, she adopted this African gray parrot from a rescue. The bird was already trained and could mimic voices perfectly. At first, I thought it was amusing how it would repeat random phrases throughout the day. The trouble started about a month ago. I was staying over at her place when I heard the bird clearly say something that made my blood run cold. It was her voice, crystal clear, saying those 3 words that should have been reserved for me. But the name that followed wasn't mine. Kevin. The bird kept saying it loved Kevin, using her exact voice and intonation. When I asked her about it, she laughed it off. She told me the bird probably picked it up from some movie or TV show she had on in the background. She reminded me that parrots repeat things randomly and don't understand context. Her explanation seemed reasonable enough, and I wanted to believe her. But the bird kept saying it. Every time I visited, without fail, that phrase would echo through her apartment. The way it said those words carried such tenderness, such intimacy, that it couldn't have been from any casual source. This was something the bird had heard repeatedly, something that had been said with genuine emotion. I started paying closer attention to her behavior. She became jumpy whenever the bird spoke around me. She would quickly turn up the TV or try to distract me with conversation whenever those particular words came out. The more defensive she became, the more suspicious I grew. 2 weeks ago, I decided to test my theory. I told her I was going out of town for work for a few days. Instead, I parked down the street from her apartment building and waited. Sure enough, on the second evening, a man I didn't recognize walked up to her building and used the buzzer. I watched from my car as he was let in. I waited 3 hours before he came back down. 3 hours that felt like an eternity as I sat there, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. The next morning, I called her and told her I was coming back early. I wanted to surprise her, I said. When I arrived at her apartment, she seemed nervous, constantly glancing around as if she was expecting something to happen. That's when I heard it again. The bird, from its cage in the living room, clear as day, repeated those words that had been haunting me. But this time, something else followed. The bird squawked loudly, and in her voice, it said something that made her face drain of all color. It told someone not to tell Mark. Not to tell me. She stood frozen, staring at the cage with pure panic in her eyes. Then she rushed toward the bird, frantically trying to cover the cage with a blanket while making shushing sounds. Her hands were shaking so badly, she could barely grip the fabric. I asked her directly who Kevin was. She stammered through some explanation about a coworker, then changed it to a neighbor, then back to someone from her gym. Her story kept shifting, and with each version, she became more flustered. I told her I knew someone had been at her apartment while I was supposedly away. I described the man I had seen, and her face went completely white. She sank into her couch and finally admitted everything. Kevin was someone she had met 4 months ago at a coffee shop near her apartment. What started as friendly conversation had developed into something more. She claimed it wasn't physical at first, just emotional support and companionship. But 3 weeks ago, it had crossed that line. She swore it was a mistake, that she was confused about her feelings, that she never meant for any of it to happen. She begged me to forgive her, promising to end things with him immediately and never see him again. But what struck me most wasn't her confession. It was how the bird had become an unwitting recorder of her private moments. Every tender word she had spoken to him, every intimate conversation they had shared, had been absorbed and stored by this creature that couldn't understand the betrayal it was revealing. I left her apartment that day and haven't been back since. She called and texted constantly for the first week, alternating between apologies and attempts to minimize what had happened. She kept saying it wasn't that serious, that they had only been physical a few times, as if that somehow made the months of emotional affair less significant. What bothered me most was how long she had been living this double life. For months of deception, for months of coming home to me while carrying on with someone else, for months of making me feel crazy for questioning what I was hearing from her bird. I started thinking about all the times she had been distant or distracted, all the times she had worked late or had mysterious errands to run. Signs I had ignored or rationalized away because I trusted her. The bird had been trying to tell me the truth all along, and I had been too naive to listen. A week after the confrontation, I decided I wasn't done with this situation. The betrayal hurt, but what hurt more was how easily she had lied to my face for months. How she had made me question my own perception of reality when I knew something was wrong. I had kept a key to her apartment, something she had given me early in our relationship. I knew she would be at work, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. I let myself into her apartment and went straight to the bird cage. The parrot recognized me and started chattering immediately. I spent the next hour teaching it some new phrases, repeating them over and over until I was confident it had absorbed them. That evening, she called me in a panic. Kevin had come over, and the bird had started saying things that made the situation very uncomfortable for both of them. Apparently, the parrot had begun announcing details about their affair in front of Kevin, using her voice to repeat intimate things she had said about him to me during our relationship. The bird had told Kevin, in her voice, how she felt guilty about what they were doing, how she wasn't sure if she wanted to leave me, how she was using their relationship to figure out what she really wanted. Things she had apparently confided to the bird during their private moments, not realizing it was memorizing every word. Kevin had left angry and confused, demanding to know why she had been discussing their relationship with a pet and questioning whether anything she had told him about her feelings was genuine. She begged me to come over and help her figure out how to make the bird stop saying these things. She was crying on the phone, explaining how mortified she was and how Kevin was now questioning everything about their relationship. I told her I couldn't help her with that problem. What the bird was saying wasn't my responsibility anymore. Update 1. 3 days later, she called again. This time, her voice was different. Resigned, maybe even relieved. Kevin had ended things with her after the bird incident. He told her he couldn't trust someone who was clearly still emotionally entangled with their ex-boyfriend, and the whole situation with the parrot had made him realize how complicated and messy her life was. But that wasn't why she was calling. She had figured out that I had been to her apartment. She found the spare key I had left on her counter after my visit, something I had done deliberately. She wanted to know what I had taught the bird. I explained that I had simply helped her pet become more honest about the situation. If she was going to have intimate conversations around a creature that records everything, she should expect those conversations to be repeated. I had just made sure the bird was sharing a more complete picture of her feelings. She accused me of sabotaging her new relationship out of spite. I reminded her that Kevin deserved to know the truth about what kind of person he was getting involved with, just like I had deserved that same honesty months ago. The conversation ended with her telling me she was going to get rid of the bird. She couldn't handle having a pet that might repeat private conversations at inappropriate times. The irony wasn't lost on me that she was more willing to abandon a rescue animal than she had been to be honest with the people in her life. Update 2. 2 weeks have passed since our last conversation. Yesterday, I received a message from an unknown number. It was Kevin. Somehow, he had gotten my contact information and wanted to talk. We met at a coffee shop downtown. He looked exhausted, like someone who hadn't been sleeping well. He told me he had spent the past couple of weeks thinking about everything that had happened, and he needed to understand the full timeline of what had been going on. Kevin explained that she had told him I was emotionally abusive and controlling, and that their relationship had been her way of finding the strength to leave me. She had painted herself as someone trapped in an unhealthy situation, using him as her emotional lifeline. But the bird's revelations had contradicted that narrative. The phrases it had repeated showed someone who was conflicted and guilty, not someone desperately trying to escape. He realized she had been lying to both of us, telling each of us what we wanted to hear while keeping us both invested in her. He apologized for his role in the affair, though he emphasized that he genuinely believed I was out of the picture based on what she had told him. He thought he was helping someone transition out of a bad relationship, not participating in infidelity. We talked for 2 hours. I learned that she had been planning to string both of us along indefinitely, keeping me as her stable foundation while exploring what Kevin might offer. She had told him she needed time to safely end things with me, playing up fears about my reaction to justify the extended timeline. Kevin also revealed something that made my blood boil. She had been using details from our relationship to build intimacy with him. Stories I thought were uniquely ours, experiences we had shared, dreams we had discussed together. She had been recycling all of it as conversation material with him. Before we parted ways, Kevin told me something that provided an unexpected sense of closure. After the bird incident, she had tried to convince him that I had somehow trained the parrot to sabotage their relationship. She couldn't accept that her own words and actions had created the situation. Even in the aftermath of being caught, she was still trying to manipulate the narrative and avoid responsibility. Update 3. It's been a month now since everything fell apart. I've had time to process what happened and gain some perspective on the whole situation. The strangest part of this entire experience wasn't the betrayal itself, but how a bird became the catalyst for uncovering the truth. If she had gotten a cat or a dog, I might never have known what was happening. The parrot's ability to perfectly mimic her voice created a recording of her deception that she couldn't deny or explain away. I've thought a lot about the psychology of what she did. Living a double life for months, maintaining emotional intimacy with two different people, crafting different versions of reality for each of us. The mental energy required to keep those stories straight, to remember what she had told whom, must have been exhausting. The bird, in its innocent way, had been revealing the complexity of her emotional state all along. It repeated her expressions of love for Kevin, but it also captured her guilt and anxiety about the situation. If I had been paying closer attention to everything the bird said, not just the parts that upset me, I might have recognized sooner that she was struggling with her own behavior. Last week, I ran into a mutual friend who told me she had indeed gotten rid of the parrot. She surrendered it back to the rescue organization, claiming it had behavioral problems that made it unsuitable as a pet. The friend also mentioned that she seemed genuinely distraught about giving up the bird, which surprised me. I've been wondering if, somewhere in her mind, she had grown attached to the parrot partly because it was the only witness to her true feelings. It knew about Kevin, but it also knew about her guilt and confusion. In a strange way, the bird might have been the only presence in her life that knew the complete truth about what she was going through. That doesn't excuse what she did to Kevin and me, but it does make me think about how lonely it must have been to live in that web of deception. She created a situation where she couldn't be completely honest with anyone except, inadvertently, a parrot that would eventually expose everything. I'm doing better now. The initial anger has faded into something more like pity. She destroyed a 2-year relationship and hurt someone who genuinely cared about her, all while creating a situation that was unsustainable from the beginning. Kevin and I have stayed in touch occasionally. Not as friends, exactly, but as two people who shared a bizarre experience and helped each other understand what really happened. He's moved on and seems to be doing well. As for me, I learned to trust my instincts. When something feels wrong, it probably is. And sometimes the truth comes from the most unexpected sources, even if that source happens to be a bird that just won't stop talking.